So Rory, it's just been over 6 years since you've left Ulster as a player and captain. What have you been involved in during that time?
On one hand, it doesn't feel like 6 years. On the other hand, it seems like a lot longer. I suppose that it's been around, I've done 2 charity walks for Cancer Fund for Children. I've been working for an insurance company in London for the last 4 years, kind of going in on a Tuesday morning, home on a Thursday night, doing mergers and acquisitions within them. A bit of farming, which my brother and my dad debate whether I'm actually farming or not, but I stay involved with the agricultural side of it. And then there's just been corporate speaking, the rugby punditry stuff for the Six Nations. So I've been keeping very, very busy, and it just felt like a good time to come back in. I was ready for a different type of challenge. The insurance work really challenged me in terms of the business side of things, having to think about, I suppose, thinking about a bigger strategy and not just about how I prepared myself to play a match at the weekend, but actually where we need to go into in terms of different countries. That was my role, was largely Central Europe, how we get in there and how we broaden what we have in the insurance company, how we buy different businesses there. And so that was a bit of a change in focus and looking at the financial side of it, because it was very much just I trained and got myself and tried to help the team where I could to get ready for a weekend. And now that business side of it has been valuable. The company itself has been really, really good. I've been surrounded by guys that are 25 plus years in the industry, teach me a lot about business and a lot about the kind of wider world outside of rugby that you don't think about when you're a player.
And what attracted you to this role as Ulster Rugby's General Manager?
I think when you're part of something for so long, so I played here for whatever it was, 15 years. And then when you take into the academies and stuff, like effectively the first time I pulled an Ulster shirt on, I was 16 years of age and I retired at 37. So it's a big part of my life. Whenever you retire, you probably don't watch it as much as, in fact, nowhere near as much as I did when I played, but you want Ulster to do well. And it was something that I was staying involved in. And whenever Bryn resigned, it came at quite a good time from my development point of view. Things had slowed down a little bit with the insurance company, just with the nature of private equity backed businesses. There's sometimes when you're really busy buying stuff, and there's sometimes when it slows down. This was a slow time, and I felt like now is a good time. You want to try to leave it long enough that most of the people that you played with and alongside or worked with from the management side of things that weren't there, because you don't want to come in with preconceived ideas from my point of view, but also people have an assumption as to what you're going to bring to the role. So look, it all sort of fell into place, and spoke to Hugh and spoke to David Humphreys, and they explained what the role was. I was ready for a challenge, and certainly when they listed what was involved in it, I thought that sounds like a challenge. When I actually got into the office, I realised that there's a lot more that you don't think about. So it's a big challenge, and I say, look, I want Ulster Rugby to be successful, and whether you're directly a part of it as I am now, or whether you're a supporter as I was for 6 years, it doesn't change how much you want this place to be successful.
And just as you said there, you've been in this role a couple of weeks now. What has those first couple of weeks looked like behind the scenes?
I think the first week was it feels like there's 200 plates spinning, and you're kind of, how do you keep them all going? And I think you start to realise that there's a brilliant support network within this organisation, that it's just about actually getting your head around how you spend your time, and how you make sure that you're there to, rather than being involved in every single decision, how you show leadership in that role to bring people along with you, and ultimately how you carve out time to make sure that you're making strategic decisions that, yes, are impactful in the next, whatever it is, week, month, 6 months to a year, but actually how it grows and how we make sure that in the next 3, 5, 10 years that this place is successful. And it's getting that balance. Because when you first come into a role and you're doing the handover and you're giving everything, all you can see is just the next meeting or the next day. So last week was a wee bit more about, right, well, actually, how do I lift myself above that and still make sure that everything that needs to be done day to day is done, but that we start to be very strategic about how we're thinking. So hopefully this week is better again, and we keep moving forward from there.
And as you step into this role and you kind of get an overview of what it looks like, is there anything that's really stuck out that you want to like get your teeth into?
I think that the pressing matters now are all the recruitment and the retention of both players and staff, and that is what's going to take up a lot of the time immediately. But beyond that, it's just about, like I say, it's about how we keep generating success. And I think we need to be very careful about how we talk about success, because all we're obsessed with success being trophies. Everyone, because it's sport, everyone's like trophies, trophies, trophies. But actually success sometimes is just about how you bring people through, and that's not just players, that's staff, that's coaches, that's bringing through supporters, how we link with the community, how we link with our sponsors, how we broaden other aspects of the game, the women's game, the mixed ability, the disability, the junior rugby. So like all of that is a barometer of success. Sometimes it's people look at trophies because it's the one thing you can go, well, you either achieved it or you didn't. But actually success is a lot broader than that. So from my point of view, I'm looking forward to obviously getting some of our bright young talent re-signed, looking at what we have in our pathway and system that'll come up through in the immediacy, looking at what there is outside of the current squad that we can use to strengthen our squad. And the big thing is that we'll only be bringing players in that strategically are important. So whether that's for an immediate impact on the pitch, a bigger overview to how they help develop our young talent, or a combination of both is ideally. But longer term, I came through a system, I came through a pathway that's very, very important to me, that we keep strengthening that, and we strengthen that with not just the playing numbers, and it has to come at the very, very base of that pyramid, how we keep growing people wanting to play rugby and wanting to love rugby, and knowing that the reality is only a very small portion of those will be professional rugby players, but actually a large portion of those could be very, very important to our club, whether that's a player in the first 15 or the fifth 15, an alakadu, an official, a coach, a referee, whatever that is. We've got to make sure at the bottom of that pyramid that that people have the love for the game that I had, that keeps them coming back. And then it's how we make sure right throughout that pathway, looking again a little bit more at the professional side of things, that we get young kids that are capable of playing for Ulster for the foreseeable future, and it's how we resource that pathway as best we can. You see it now on the pitch on a Friday or Saturday night. There's more and more talented young players here, but how do we support them? How do we support the coaches along that pathway to be the best they can be, and that we don't set the ceiling, that actually their ability sets the ceiling, and we support them to get there.
And just on the pathway, you're obviously looking at it now from a different point of view, and it's so important to every club in rugby. But how strong do you feel our current pathway is?
I think there's some really, really good foundations in place. I think you see it with the number of players that we have representing Ulster at the weekend. But it's like anything, we always need to keep building and growing these foundations and improving on them. We need to get our underage teams, we need to be constantly challenging and winning those underage games. We need to see our schools and our club underage teams being able to more than just compete, to be able to be successful and develop there whenever they're playing against sort of other teams and our rivals within the island of Ireland. And it's about then how we best equip that pathway to produce players that aren't just Ulster players here, that can push on and be Irish internationals, British Irish Lions. I think that we need to be very ambitious with what we do with our pathway, knowing that we have strong foundations to build on, but actually what can we keep adding to that support system to make sure that the players achieve everything that they're capable of achieving, and that the whole way along that we minimise that drop-off rate, understanding that it's going to be there. I've already said that there's no silver bullet in terms of going, right, bang, this is what we're going to do, and for the next 20 years we're going to be successful with loads of players coming out of the academy. It's not the reality. The reality is we have very strong foundations to build on. We just got to keep pushing forward and taking a slightly different look And it might be sometimes thinking outside the box, looking at how other teams, other sports, other organisations do it, and learning a little bit from that and bringing it into here, and really not be closed mind about anything. And like I say, just adding on those foundations.
And then just looking at the senior men's squad and observing training and chatting to the players and the coaches, what is your early read on this current squad identity and the potential there?
Yeah, I think firstly with just the identity and the cultural side of it, it's something that we'll probably do a little bit of work on as we come in. We need to understand what's unique and what's special about being from Ulster, or if you're not from Ulster, playing for Ulster. So we'll try to we'll try to get a lot of strength around that and sort of formulate something that is representative of almost like a glance back, looking at what has been before and the wonderful history that we've had as a rugby club and a rugby team, but ultimately looking forward, because the past doesn't win you things, but it can set you up to win things. So it's for them to understand, what it means to play for here, and then to figure out how we keep moving forward. There seems to be a really, really good atmosphere around here. It helps when you're winning more than you're losing, which we've done at the start of the season. But also we talked about success, not necessarily being about, in professional sport it is about the result, but there's certain, you can win a game easily and not play well, but you can actually win and play well and create that good atmosphere. And I think that's what we're doing by and large now. The atmosphere seems to be really good. And this first period for me is just about observing that. And it's very hard to do because everyone has preconceived ideas. There's going to be supporters listening to this. There's going to be people involved in the community game listening to this, and they're going to have a preconceived idea of what's going on here. Look, and I was no different. But the big thing is that I give myself enough time to assess, what is perception and what's reality. And then with that reality is how we grow it. There seems to be a really, really good atmosphere around the minute. They seem to be being very, very well coached with a nice degree of challenge within that to make sure nobody ever stays comfortable. And that already is their key ingredients. If you want to sort of push on and start to achieve the success in terms of performance and how you drive people forward, they're the key ingredients to it. And it's here now, and I suppose my job is to make sure that we keep challenging that and making sure that it is in a healthy place.
And given that you still are, it is very early in your role here, what are you excited about, and what is the optimistic for the future?
I think first and foremost, I'm excited about the game, coming up against Benetton. Look, it's ultimately, it's the bit you miss. People ask you what you miss about rugby, and I actually do miss a bit of the training just because of the way I was. I loved just any time I had a rugby ball in my hand. I loved it, but ultimately it's the match nights here, and it's getting back to where this place is filled to capacity, and that wherever you go, and I was lucky enough to play in some big games here where the stadium's full, and everywhere you go in the province leading into that game and post that game, people want to know how you're tracking. Are you ready for the game? And then post-match, you'll always get the match report from everyone in the street. But look, it's a small place here, and that's the beauty of it. And that's the bit I'm looking forward to. It's, can we now start to push on and go, right, well, let's have some of these players that maybe haven't experienced as many full houses here as I have. Can we start to build something that people want to get behind that fills this place? Because I'd love nothing better than to turn up here in match night knowing that it's a sellout and that unbelievable atmosphere that, let's be honest, that a lot of opposition teams are beaten before they get onto that pitch because of the people that come here and support it. So it's about the matches. I have a lot of work to do in the background that doesn't involve preparing the players for the match, but when we get here on a Friday and Saturday as a professional organisation, that's who you're judged, that's the pressure, and those are the moments that you want to be involved in.
And then finally, if you could send one message to the Ulster Rugby supporters for the future, what would you say?
I just think it's about the support. It's giving the players and the young players coming through the support that I received throughout. I always tell the story about when I didn't make the 2013 Lions tour originally, and was you start to get reflective about, maybe you're not as good as you think you are, and, maybe that chance passed you by, and maybe you start to dislike rugby a little bit for a day or two. And I turned up here on a Friday night and played against Cardiff, and the reception I got was what almost instantly flicked me back into going, you know what, I love rugby. And look, somebody's decision not to pick me in something doesn't take away from everything that I've achieved and been supported by here. And look, that's what I want for our current squad, but I also want our kids in the pathway, any sort of overseas players we're looking at, I want them to look at that and think that's what I want to be a part of. Because if you ask a lot of our overseas players, it's that community spirit. Now we're going to have to, as a professional team, make sure that we really heavily engage back with the community, because that's what the roots are here. But that's what I'd say to the supporters and anyone that has an interest in Ulster Rugby is, let's work both sides to make sure that we form those links, so we get that really special bond that there is between the people on the pitch and the people that put the players on the pitch and the fans that come to watch us.